Today's devotion, still walking alongside the Symbols of Salvation Advent devotional. It comes from 1 Corinthians 3:16, where it says, "Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you?" And I think that's a powerful thing for us to keep in mind. Um, because as we live our lives, it changes how we interact with people. And it's something along the lines of, um, if you know, I guess there's this scientific principle, I guess. I should know what it's called, but I forget what it's called, and I'm not going to look it up right now. But the observation of an experiment can change the outcome, and I believe the principle actually comes from quantum physics, but I think it's much more like relatable and practical that we can see it in psychology, right? For example, if you're doing an experiment on kids, which sounds terrible, but like you put them in a room with candy or something, and you're wanting to see how they react. If they know you're watching them, their reaction is probably going to be different from if they think they're not being watched. And this is something that plays out in a couple different scenarios, but I I think there is this reality too. If we are being watched, our behavior frequently is different than when we're not. And we can get into a discussion about, integrity means, you act the same when you're not being watched as you do when you are being watched. And yes, our behavior should be consistent, but the reality is, in a lot of cases, it's not. Um, but what this passage kind of reminds us is you're never not being watched. You're never truly alone. You see, God's Spirit dwells in us. Um, and we are God's temple. So we ought to live our lives in honor of that, in recognition of that. And, if for no other reason, then, like, God sees what you're doing, right? Nothing is hidden from Him. So if you're doing something that is displeasing to Him, like, you're not getting away with it. He sees you. He knows it's Christmas time. Santa sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows when you've been bad or good. So be good for goodness sake. Side note, kind of creepy, right? If like we buckle down and think about it, Santa, what? Not important. Moving on. God actually has that capability, and he promises to do that. He's like, I'm going to walk alongside you. My spirit dwells in you. I know what you're doing. I see what you're doing. And I think that should kind of encourage us to act appropriately, right? So it feels like a weird way to think about it, but just some scenarios I'm picturing, like if you say you're having an argument with your spouse, and you're talking to your husband or your wife in a way that you would never do if other people were there. Okay, like you say you're out to dinner with friends. You and your spouse are out to dinner with friends, and you had a disagreement, but you would never speak in a negative way, in a derogatory way, with the other couple there. Well, you shouldn't. Then the logic would be, even when you're in the midst of this disagreement, this argument with your spouse, remember that the Spirit of God is dwelling in you, that the Lord's temple is near to you, um, and you're called to still treat your spouse in that kind, compassionate way. Um, and the same could be said for all sorts of relationships with your kids, or when you're home. Say you have your day off once a week, and you're in the house by yourself on your day off. The kids are at school, your spouse works, whatever you're home for yourself by the day, and the temptation is to just sit on the couch and like chill all day. Listen, because I'm not gonna say exactly what you think I'm gonna say. Sometimes maybe you do need that. And maybe the Holy Spirit's sitting right next to you on the couch saying you need to recover and rest a little bit so that when your family comes home, you can be the husband, the wife, the father. You can be that person they need you to be. So it is appropriate for you to take that rest. But maybe the Holy Spirit's standing over in the kitchen saying, listen, these dishes have piled up and you need to take care of them, because if your wife comes home or if your husband comes home and sees that pile, it is going to add just an incredible amount of stress to their afternoon. So in all of these situations, and I listed two because I'm sitting here, I'm looking around, I'm thinking, these are situations that I would think about. That the Holy Spirit is there encouraging us, watching us, being that accountability piece for us. And I would encourage you to try and keep that on the forefront of your mind as you live your life. So with that, brothers and sisters, go in peace, serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.